See, I got the worst spot in the gym, man. Have to get all the stuff off the bus, all the mats soft and gone. I think the coach would do it another time. Let's see, I got my pillows, man.
Which dude?
My Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the safe travels. Lord, be with us, keep us safe, wake us up tomorrow morning, and you do. Jesus' name.
As I lay upon the mats in a cold gym, trying to get a few hours of sleep, I had a dream. In this dream, I saw a celestial city, a place of true happiness. Looking, I saw a path that led to the city. The path seemed easy to see, but surprisingly, there were few on it. As I looked closer, I saw some of my gymnasts starting on the path. At first, the path was clear, but soon obstacles appeared, and before long, the path seemed to completely disappear. In my dream, I began to worry about how the team would reach the celestial city with so many obstacles before them. How could I keep them from becoming distractions? How could I keep their friends from leading them off the path? As I watched some of them being enticed by fantasy fare, the burden on me began to grow. At times in my dream, I would see team members finding their way back to the path. But as they became comfortable with their trip, I saw the sands of complacency in their path. Could they not see the need to stay active and not just become a spectator?
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's matchup between the Georgia Lucky Sevens and the Las Vegas Blackjacks. Two tough teams. It should be a great match. It looks like the two teams are ready to head out onto the field. Let's go to Bob for the starting lineup.
Thank you, Big John. And yes, this is looking like it'll be a great match. For the Georgia Lucky Sevens, we have Canadian Fury Wilkins, Chris the Tink French, Penner the Peaceful Player, Esteban the Magical Mexican, and Carson the Beast Baskin. For the Vegas Blackjacks, we have Ari the Costa Rican Hurricane, Eric the Gentle Giant, Alex the Gorgeous Guatemalan, Billy the Furious Freck, and John the Tank Stewart. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Bob. Well, these two teams are known to be extremely rough. The refs will have a hard time keeping these two teams under control.
In my dream, I tried so hard to get my team's attention, to get them back on the path. But even when they did find their way back, they would quickly deviate again. Why? Why was it so hard to keep them on the path? Why did they have such a fascination with the worldly distractions? And my burden continued to grow. Most of the time in my dream, the team seemed to be off the path, looking for shortcuts or short-lived enjoyment. Sometimes when they did find the path, they would stay the course through the trials and the challenges. This brought me some relief from worry, but I found myself still criticizing their efforts, which made the burden on my back even heavier. There came a point in my dream when the path appeared to go over a mountain. There were many who attempted to make their way over the mountain by hard work and effort. Some even tried to find a way over the mountain by means of ropes and determination. But there were forces on the top of the mountain that blocked their way, forcing the team members to work harder and harder. Yet no matter how hard they worked, they could not reach the Celestial City. As I watched the team members on their journey, I noticed that inside of each person, there was a war going on. Am I better than those around me? Can I achieve more than someone else? My burden grew and grew as I watched them choose their leaders. Did they not realize how important it is to choose the right commander?
She never slows down. She doesn't know why, but she knows that when she's all alone, feels like it's all coming down. She won't turn around. The shadows are long and she fears if she cries that first tear, the tears will not stop raining down. So stand in the rain, stand your ground, stand up when it's all crashing down. You stand through the pain, you won't drown, and one day what's lost can be found. You stand in the rain. She won't make a sound, alone in this fight with herself and the fears whispering. If she stands, she'll fall down. She wants to be found. The only way out is through everything she's running from. Wants to give up and lie down. So stand in the rain, stand your ground, stand up when it's all crashing down. You stand through the pain, you won't drown, and one day what's lost can be found. You stand in the rain. So stand in the rain, stand your ground, stand up when it's all crashing down, stand through the pain, you won't drown, and one day what's lost can be found. So stand in the rain, stand your ground, stand up when it's all crashing down. You stand through the pain, you won't drown, and one day what's lost can be found. You stand in the rain. Stand in the rain, stand your ground, stand up when it's all crashing down. You stand through the pain, you won't drown, and one day what's lost can be found. You stand in the rain. So stand in the rain, stand your ground, stand up when it's all crashing down, stand through the pain, you won't drown, and one day what's lost can be found. So stand in the rain, stand your ground, stand up when it's all crashing down. You stand through the pain, you won't drown, and one day what's lost can be found. You stand in the rain.
dog you never saw, been in trouble with the law since the day they was born. Straightening the curves, yeah, climbing the hills. Someday the mountain might get over the wall, never will.
Wish that I was on old Rocky Top down in the Tennessee hills. Ain't no smoggy smoke on Rocky Top, ain't no telephone bills. Once I had a girl on Rocky Top, half bear, the other half cat. Wild as a mink, but sweet as soda pop, I still dream about.
A story about a man named Jed, a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. Then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude oil, that is, black gold, Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. The kinfolks said, Jed, move away from there. Said, California is the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is, swimming pools, movie stars. The Beverly Hillbilly.
Bond. James Bond.
In my dream, there seemed to be more and more of my team leaving the path. Then, I saw a team member who had a burden like mine. I saw her struggle with her burden. It continued to get bigger and more difficult to carry, just as mine had. Oh, how I wanted to help her carry her burden. But alas, mine was so large, I could not help.
Well, my parents split up. It was a pretty big deal, but I didn't know how to talk about it. A lot of my friends' parents were divorcing, and they seemed to be okay with it, but I thought my world was being ripped apart.
I just don't love you anymore.
Why can't we give him just one more try?
I started packing things anyways. Maybe I thought I would run away. Maybe I just wanted to protect the things that I loved and have them close to me all the time. I put in Little Bear, my favorite books, and a couple of other things that meant a lot to me.
Why are you being so unreasonable?
Joint custody wasn't my idea.
I had to put clothes in for going back and forth between Mom and Dad's. My suitcase was packed and I carried it around. I carried it to school, to church, to friends' houses, everywhere I went, really. For a couple years, no one saw it. Or so I thought, until one Sabbath at church, my teacher asked me about it. She said,
Annie, you look like you're carrying a heavy load there.
I told her it wasn't heavy because it was all the things that I loved. And I opened it up a little bit to show her what was inside. And I tried to tell her about Little Bear and how scared he was sometimes. Instead of helping me, she crammed this big Bible in my bag. She said, if I would just accept Jesus, everything would get better. But I never saw Jesus. All I got was the Bible, and it made my back heavier. When I was 14, I met this guy.
Hey.
We met because he tripped over my bag. He never even saw it.
Whoa!
So, he was really cute, and I guess you could say we fell for each other. And I thought the best way to show him how I felt was to open my bag for him. And so I opened it up a little bit to show him what was inside, and I tried to tell him about the things that I loved, and how I was so scared that I would lose them if I didn't carry them with me. He acted like he was interested and that he cared about the things that I cared about. He even took some of the things that I gave him. And then he decided he didn't like me anymore.
Look, Annie, this is not going to work out anymore.
And they were trash. I never wanted to open my bag again. I guess I still had my things, but they were different. I tried to focus on schoolwork, but I couldn't, and teachers kept putting all this pressure on me.
You have such great potential, Annie.
They kept telling me how smart I was and how if I would just work harder and study more, I could get really good grades and get into a really good college, which I really wanted to do. And I guess they couldn't see the load I was already carrying, so they loaded me up with all the books that I needed to learn, the things that I needed to know. And then I started obsessing over how heavy I felt. Every single day I felt bigger than all the other girls. I thought, maybe all these bags are keeping me from having friends, so I thought I could just run more and exercise more and eat less. So I started running on the treadmill and eating just carrots. But I guess with all these bags I couldn't work out so good. Maybe I lost weight, but I really couldn't tell. So I carried my workout weights to remind me to stay in shape. I got a part-time job so I could have a phone. Hello? Yeah? Whatever. My dad said he would buy me a car. My mom said he just feels guilty about the divorce. I thought he felt sorry for me for having to carry all these bags around. My life was getting so heavy. I felt like I was drowning in my parents'
go to the lake this weekend with me and Jim?
No, I have plans with Dad.
It's okay, Annie. Don't worry about it. We'll get together next weekend.
There's this guy in my math class. We talk sometimes.
Hi, Annie.
Then, one day, he put a gun to his head, and a bunch of us attended the service, and all I could think was, he probably just had a lot of bags, just like me, and he just wanted to blow them away. Then someone tried to tell me about Jesus, and I was like, oh, no, you don't. I'm still carrying that big Bible in this bag, and all it is heavy. They said, faith isn't about carrying around the Bible. It's about being carried by the God of the Bible. Clever. They said, Jesus said, come unto me, all who are tired of carrying all their bags. Right? Who isn't tired of carrying their bags? They said, Jesus said, come unto me, and he will give you rest. How? How can he give me rest? I'm so tired. I have these bags, and I don't know where to put them. I can't get rid of them, and I have school, I have work, I have responsibilities, I have pain, I have trash. I'm so tired. And they said,
Look,
what?
his arms.
So?
They're open.
They were nailed open.
Put your bags on them.
I can't.
Lay them at his feet.
They won't come off me. They won't come off.
Just try.
They're so heavy.
Put them on him.
I can't. I just can't.
All to Jesus, let's surrender. All to Him, my healing. Trust His presence daily. I surrender all. I surrender all to Thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender
Oh, the joy I found when she was able to let her burden go. At that moment, I also was released from mine. I realized that the burden was already taken by someone who could handle it. Oh, how I enjoyed the freedom. I just wanted to run, do cartwheels, and yes, even try a flip. Could others find the same freedom? Oh, I hope so. Awakening from my dream, I realized that no matter how hard I tried to get my team or myself to the celestial city, there was only one way, and that was to be led by the guide who had traveled before us, Jesus Christ.
You're the only one I
the way